Alright, so, I hope I'm not good. Alright, so that was a little bit nerve-wracking putting this on my head. I was going to throw this up and catch it as a gag, but it's heavier than I intended. Okay, principles of being a good artist. I'm going to teach you guys what my art teacher taught me. Hold on a second. I think you guys have to be able to see me better. Yep. And, okay, so principles of ceramics. Respect Mother Nature's rules. Know your material. For example, for ceramics, this stuff is a high fire clay. If you, let's say there's a low fire clay, you put this in your little kiln oven, put at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, low fire, you know what's going to happen? It's going to melt. And that's not good. Know your materials. Know what you're doing with them, too. Know how it works. This clay, if this is not porcelain, this is white stone. High fire. You fire it at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit up. Gotta have a good kiln for it, too. But different clays have this thing called memory. And an example of memory, I think if I had porcelain, I could show you best, but I don't. I just demonstrate. So let's say I have this, right? You bend it like this. What's going to happen with something like porcelain is it's actually going to start bending back slowly a little bit. That's just the way the porcelain works because it has, in a sense, memory. Other thing about clay is that if you compress it, it actually gets stronger. You pull it, it gets weaker. If you stretch it, the more you stretch it, the weaker it gets, and the weaker your sculpture is going to be. So if you want to build something that's going to last, you got to be careful. Different ways of doing this. A lot of my sculptures have parts of them that do not always last the longest if I don't do it right. These things right here. For this particular one, I don't do this anymore. I'm careful. I still do the whiskers, but I do it differently. When I made it, I stretched it. So this part of this sculpture is actually weaker. It breaks easier, which is not something you always want. You know, we're not making shoddy artwork. You don't want to do that. Yeah, that's part of that. Stretchy. It's not very good. Compressing clay is good. One thing people do a lot is you pug your artwork. You don't pug your artwork. That would destroy it. I'm going to tell you right now, it's 5:30 a.m. 5:35 a.m. Pugging it, it's kind of like compressing it. Gets the air bubbles up. One of the methods for pugging is called the ram's head method. And there's many reasons you want to pug your clay. One is if you have air pockets, what happens is the moisture builds up in the kiln, and especially if you have a high fire piece, it works for low fire too, this happens. If you have an air pocket, the moisture will build up in that, and steam will expand, and your piece will explode. And even worse about it exploding is the fact that if you have somebody else's pieces in the kiln, it explodes and then breaks the pieces around it. Or worse, you have pieces, that piece will shards of it may end up in the kiln wall, and that is a total bitch to get out. So be careful. If you have a piece that you're worried about air bubbles or air pockets, what you can do is you can dry it out for a year or so. Just leave it out, don't fire it for about a year, and then there's no moisture to expand and essentially blow up. Another thing people do is they set their kiln on a low setting for a very long time to evaporate all the moisture out, which is good. Speaking of moisture, it's another part. I'll show you the ram's head method first. So it's one thing, I do this a lot. Do this, smash. Yep. Really want to do it, yeah. Not always too hard. Press your clay, get it into a nice ball. You especially want to do this if you're throwing. Palms, use the weight of your body, press into it. Like this. And it's not moist enough to pug right now, so it's better to do when you're standing up and have a board that won't move. Push forward, that push forward, and what you end up getting is like this. It looks like a spiral eventually. I can't. Ugh. But yeah, totally fucking this up right now. And eventually, it looks like a little bit of a ram's head. As you see, the whole table's moving, so maybe not right now. Okay, especially if you're throwing on a wheel, you want to do that. Might get a throwing video in here, but it'll be somebody else teaching it if I do. Next thing you want to do is remember, manage your moisture. The more moist the clay it is, the more susceptible it is to gravity. So if you're doing something like a tree, you want to slowly dry it. But also the other thing I do is when I'm making structures that stand up, is I put in supports and I actually work with drier clay. And I make sure it's dry before I add stuff on. And when I add stuff on, it's relatively dry. It's an important thing. That way the structure is more structural integrity. But yes, manage your moisture. Clay will obviously lose moisture. Something a lot of people seem to forget is that, let's say you have a piece of clay here, this board here. The moisture can actually seep down into the board. But usually, with sculptures, most of the moisture stays at the base of the areas that are thicker. If you have one part that's dry and one part that's wet, that's not always good. The more the clay dries, the more it shrinks. Some clays shrink about 20% when they dry. When you fire it, it shrinks even more. If you're making an ocarina, it's a pain in the ass. That's why I use wax to modify the whole size, to tune it correctly. And that can also shake pieces off too. Ocarinas are a pain in the ass if you want to actually get them to be good. Let's see. Manage your moisture. Very important thing to do. Sometimes what I do when I have a piece that I want to dry out evenly is I will stack up paper towels and put it under the piece. And then I will put saran wrap over it. The frick was that? I think I just broke something. Then you put saran wrap over the piece, just like this. Move a little bit like that. Dry slowly. One of the main reasons you want it to dry slowly is so it dries evenly. If it doesn't dry evenly, it's going to break. I had total heartbreak with one of my pieces I made when I was younger. Gorgeous, gorgeous castle piece. And it had a dragon spiraling around it. And the dragon dried first. And it constricted and shattered. It wasn't very fun, gotta say. And then to make matters worse, okay, so had the castle standing there for a few years. Finally decided to fire it. Fired it. And then I did something really stupid. It was a medium fire clay. I forgot that. I glazed it with high fire glaze, put it in the kiln, high fire, and then just scrape it off the shelf, which really wasn't very fun. Had a nice texture though. That happens. So yeah, that's another thing you want to pay attention to is know what material you get. I suggest labeling it. It's kind of obvious. More about basic ceramic stuff. Principles of being a decent artist. That's the name of this video. Knowing your material. One of the most important things to remember is if you want to make something in nature, such as bricks. Bricks aren't really nature. Make anything, you think about how that thing's made. For bricks like masonry bricks, what I do, and I probably shouldn't be giving away my secrets here, is actually wait till the clay dries first and then I carve into it. For something like water, I feel really giving away my trade secrets, aren't I? I'm not telling you how to do water. Sorry. I invented the technique. I don't want somebody else stealing it and getting credit for it. So, maybe I'll do another video on that. I don't know. But yeah, you think about how it was made in nature. One of the, and this is something that actually takes a lot of skill, so I will teach you this. A little bit of an ass, I know. I don't really care. You want to do wood? A good way to do it, take a piece of bark and press it into the wood. But you don't want to just press it into the wood. You want to look at how a piece of wood is made. You want to press it at different angles into the wood. So that's how you get bark. And actually it's pretty convincing bark. And what I do is I take iron oxide, and then obviously after it's fired, yes, yeah, one fire. And then you rub it into the wood with a sponge, and take this. Okay, you paint it on first, or you can actually do a rub. I forget what people call it. Rub it into the wood with a sponge, and it looks pretty cool. You get a cool texture. It works. Yes. Okay. Let's see. That's another principle of ceramics. But yeah. Use a good wood texture. I did. I don't want breaking. Turtle shells, I dry them first before I carve them. Leg fell off this guy, so he's not for sale unless you want a 3-legged turtle. I'm gonna have to bring this to my parents' house and fire it. And don't ask about the penis pipe. I'm actually planning on putting that in a box, ceramic box, and then firing it inside of the box in the kiln because I don't want my parents seeing that. And I hope they won't watch this video. Or the other one. Okay, let's see. Other stuff about I'm sitting on something. Other stuff about ceramics. The reason this video isn't for kids. Something to ask you, is this video for kids? It's a good thing to do that though. Ouch. Let's see, other principles. When you make something, you want to think about how it's made in nature, basically. Like I said with the bricks. Rocks. Okay, how to do a good rock texture? One of the things you want to do is you want to dry the clay first. One thing I do to help with the rock texture is I wait till it's leather hard. It's not completely dry. You can actually just look up the term, leather hard ceramics. Hopefully you won't get a porno. You might get a really weird porno. Yeah, and then you want to carve it. And it's easiest to carve when it's leather hard. When it's completely dry, when you carve it, it's just a heads up. You get a lot of clay dust. The clay particles are very small. You can breathe them in. They're not lethal. They're not like cigarette smoke. They're like not nearly as bad as cigarette smoke. Still want to watch for that. And it might be a good idea, especially if you have asthma or COPD. If you have COPD and you are carving your art pieces, wear an N95 mask. I knew a guy in one of my ceramics classes who did have COPD, and it was a problem for him. So you want to be careful. You don't want to, end up yeeting yourself into an early grave. So you got that. Leather hard clay, carve. And when it's leather hard, it's easy to carve. You can get a clean cut. If you want it to look like rock, if you want it to look like rough rock, like it's been, just gone through a lot of stuff, like any rock, I guess. What I do is actually dry it completely. And then for some of my pieces, I have like a rock border. I'll find one. Just hold on a sec. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Oh, shooting too long. I think most of them are at my parents' house. Shit. Alright, so, oh, here's a good example. Yep. Let's hope I don't break anything trying to get to it. Here we go. Okay. Alright. Yep. This guy is an experimental piece I did. But yes, this is one I dried out first. And this is something about the rock, is that when rock breaks, a lot of times, this is what I figured. This is the iron oxide technique. I added some other stuff in it too. When rock breaks, it's most likely to break from downward pressure. So, and this is my thinking, by the way. I'm really proud of this. So, reference me. Where's the tool? I find like a tool with a chiseled edge works best for this. I wish I had some dry clay so I could. I think I do have some dried up clay I can show you this with. Yeah, okay. Chisel tool works well. Just another thing. If you're buying tools and you buy iron tools, it's not a good idea unless you consistently keep them dry. These are iron tools. I got kind of cheap. They're good tools. They're sturdy. Problem is they rust. And they're kind of useless. But yes, keep them dry. Chisel tools, very good. I think these are for polymer clay or something like that. Sorry for the lapse and stuff. Okay. Yeah, this piece. Side of the rock. Yes. I wish I could pause the stream. I'm gonna play music for you. I sounded like a crazy person. Oh. Before I go into the other thing, whenever I go walking around, I actually look for stuff I can use for textures. I use this for a coral texture. This is a... I forget what this is called. It looks kind of gross, to be completely honest. Good for textures, though. I go walking around the woods, I look for different types of bark. I have many different types of bark. When I was working at my parents' house, my dad almost threw a lot of it away. It was kind of funny. I'm like, I use that piece of bark! But yeah, I go looking around for different kinds of rocks so I can use them for textures. Always be on the lookout for good textures. That's what I say. Can even use the side of this for good texture. Hopefully a company won't sue you for using their texture. Kidding. There's a coconut here, textures, and my conquest for dried clay. Oh, that's great English. Ah, here we go. Dried piece. A small dried piece, but whatever, who cares? Okay. Completely dry. I usually use downward force. And I like to break it up a little bit, too. And you want to put grooves in, and when I'm carving out these pieces, usually I'm thinking of how I'm going to glaze it, too. One of the things about glaze is different kinds of glazes that can get into the cracks. One of the things I like to do is I like to rub iron oxide into the cracks, so that it emphasizes the texture. That's something my art teacher taught me. Or you can rub underglazes in, too. Underglazes are a great thing. One thing that baffles me that people usually don't think of is mixing different kinds of underglaze. And you can mix underglazes with iron oxide to get a really cool kind of... Iron oxide kind of gives like a shine to it. So I mix different types of underglazes together and put iron oxide in. And it's really cool, some of the stuff you can get. I'm not entirely sure if it affects the overglazes you use. It may. I haven't tested that yet. But, yeah, that's one thing. But yeah, just think about how rocks I'm getting stuff. I usually use downward force. Oh, yes. Also another thing, and if you're an artist, I mean, if you've worked with sculpture, you probably know this. But, I also use different parts of the tool. When it's bone hard, or I call it when your clay has a boner, or is boned, ha ha ha, bad joke. Yeah, when it's bone hard, which means it's completely dry, there's not much moisture, if any moisture in, like this is, it's a lot more delicate, which is a huge problem. I like carving the clay when it's in the state, but it's dangerous. You got to be careful, because you can accidentally fuck up your entire piece. And then you have to remoisturize it, which is a pain in the ass. It's my poison sauce. Yeah. So, I'm going to do rock texture. Oh, that's convincing enough, doesn't it? Here we go. Little rock. World War II Japanese bayonet, by the way. Cool, isn't it? It's a historical artifact. Don't be a judgy person. I have an American one too. Okay, what else was I gonna show you? Oh, yeah, sponge texture, good texture. Sponges are really good for managing moisture too. Okay, so one of the things I do for some of my sculptures when I'm freaking, come on, work, good. One of the other things I like to do when managing the moisture in my sculpture. Hold on a sec, I'm having computer issues. Okay, paper towels are a great thing to do. I reuse my paper towels because I use like a clusterfuck load of paper towels. Probably the wrong word to use. Yes, I use paper towels. Very interesting. Not interesting at all. But I coat the piece in paper towels. I actually have drier paper towels on the inside, and then I slightly more moisture further it goes out. That works. And then saran wrap. Saran wrap's nice, but it's not a guarantee for keeping your piece moist. That's one thing. Let's see what else. Okay. Here's another one. This is actually really cool, but it's really weird. Clay is oddly porous and can like absorb moisture. So for some of my sculptures, what I used to do is I used to put salt in the base, like just so it looks kind of cool. But I'll show you this. My apartment has really high moisture in it, which can be a problem. Oh, this is another important thing too. Is really important. The moisture in your clay, the moisture in your apartment, and the moisture outside actually does affect how quickly your clay dries out because it's so sensitive to the moisture. Let's see if I can find the piece I'm talking about. Oh yes, this boy. Okay, so I used to do this where I'd put salt in the bottom of the piece as like a. It's not my best piece, but bacon boy. Yeah, and it didn't break the piece, but the salt actually went straight through the side and started growing on the side of the piece. Isn't that wicked? I just kept it because it's just so cool. It is completely covering the log and the turtle, so it's going to be coated in salt crystals. It's just like, I'm just surprised it's not broken. They're all glued together. Because it's just so cool. I know I'm going to get requests for glaze chemistry videos. That's going to take a while for me to do because I don't know anything about that yet. Trying to learn is a total bitch to do, but I know there's websites that are good for that. I know one got taken down. It just sucks. Let's see what else. That's about it. If you buy clay, keep it moist, obviously. Your moisturizing clay is a bitch and a half. I guess you can say a few more. Oh, yeah. All right. Bye, everyone. Stay healthy.